Do we, on a regular basis, indicate to our kids that we're so happy we're 40, or so happy we're 69, or so happy we're 25? Are there advantages to the ages and the places where we now are able to live our lives?
There are so many things that work to steal our kids' attention, and chief among them might be this idea of just feeling good. And what do we do when our kids turn to other substances to feel good about things? So much so that they end up turning away from hard times and actually dropping out of challenging things like school. It can be a dark place for parents when our kids are in these moments where they just want to quit it all and move on because culture and society and even other substances work to really teach them that they can feel good all the time. Well, today in the Celebrate Kids podcast, in this daily segment, Facing the Dark, Dr. Kathy has some very important insights for us to help guide us through these challenging cultural times, but also to give us a sense and vision of what it looks like to parent our kids well in this moment. So let's turn now to Dr. Kathy Cook.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So, Dr. Kathy, cannabis use during adolescence and young adulthood has been linked to lower academic performance. This is a report that's coming out that looks at 63 different studies that comprises 438,329 participants. The evidence has indicated that cannabis use among individuals ages 24 and younger was likely associated with lower school grades, as well as less likelihood of high school completion and post-secondary degree attainment. Evidence of the same certainty has also showed that cannabis use among the same age group was likely associated with an increased level of school dropout and school absenteeism. So, Dr. Kathy, I wanted to ask you and kind of pull back a little bit here because cannabis, for the most part, has been billed for many of us as a harmless drug that really kids can use as they mature and get of age. And we kind of say of age being between 18 and 24. These studies really show that that actually could be really harmful. Why does cannabis have this kind of impact on young people?
Yeah, this is good to talk about. And this study is impressive because of how many studies were associated and then all the number of participants. This really needs to be paid attention to. And I'll start out by saying that it's in my history, it's always been known as an entry drug. One fear that we've had about marijuana is that if people start that and they like it, they go from marijuana to something that's ultimately more dangerous. Although marijuana is dangerous enough, it changes your mood, it changes your thought pattern, it changes perceptions of reality. It makes some people jittery and happy. It makes others sad and depressed. So there's no way of knowing that until you start using it. And what will it activate within your DNA? I think it's fascinating and really important to understand that it impairs memory. There's research that would suggest this. It increases frustration and disorientation to the way that the world works. We don't need more young people disoriented to the way the world works. They're already confused because of what technology has taught them about the way the world works. And what's fascinating too, Wayne, is that if you're the one on the drug, you don't know that's happening. So if you were to interview people who use marijuana, they go, oh, there's no big deal, nothing's wrong. But they don't realize when they're high on the drug, if you will, that they are disoriented and frustrated and confused, and they lack memory. It's those of us hanging out with them who realize what it's doing to them. It's brain health, especially under the age of 25 when the brain is finished. We know, again, from researchers doing the heavy lifting on this, that it is changing brain structure. Things like attention span and ADD, ADHD, and memory building and those kinds of things are affected by what way too many people think of as a harmless drug.
Dr. Kathy, I think that that's really helpful to think through this and helps kind of frame some of this for, at least for me, for sure. How do we get kids to see beyond that idea of this being something that can lead them to kind of current pleasure and have a larger or a longer range view of what their future could look like? I think this is even true without cannabis, that so much of the world today really encourages young people to enjoy the moment, or you only live once, right? YOLO, the phrase that many of us have said over the last decade. There's just this push right now, I feel like, for us to live in the moment and not really to have a vision for the future. How can we guide our kids to maybe have that muscle inside of them?
Yeah, I love that, and I agree that that's not just an issue surrounding, cannabis use. A couple of things I would think of, Wayne, we need to model a joy in living. We adults, whether we're educators or pastors, teachers, parents, friends, just hanging out in the church lobby, if you will. Do we model joyful living? Do we model pro-living? When I do banquets to raise money for saving babies from abortion and keeping families together, I like to say that I'm pro-eternal life, pro-abundant life, pro-life, pro-love, pro-family, and pro-living. And if we're not pro-living, we'll never get to the rest of it. Because if we're not pro-living, we might as well die. If we're not pro-living, we'll never discover the abundance that Jesus went to the cross that we would have. And that really breaks my heart. So do we, on a regular basis, indicate to our kids that we're so happy we're 40, or so happy we're 69, or so happy we're 25? Are there advantages to the ages and the places where we now are able to live our lives? And let's talk about reality too. I'm not saying that you, in the middle of your joy and your abundance, that you don't talk about finances are tight. That's why we're not getting 8 chicken nuggets at McDonald's. We're only going to get 4. Because in the other episode you talked about that. I thought that was great. We're not having dessert, or we're going to go out to eat, but we're going to all be satisfied with water. Because if we all get a $2.50 beverage, that's like off the chart ridiculous. They're making too much money on that, and we don't have that kind of money. So let's talk honestly about finances and marriage and singleness, and what's easy and hard, and what's joyful, and careers that are meaningful and that have purpose and that aren't horrible. Like, I've never worked a job I didn't like. I can't imagine what it must be like for people who have a career that they don't enjoy, a position in a company where they don't feel honored, and maybe they come home and they're critical, and they just talk very negatively about what happens at work. If I were living with that, and I'm 11 and older, I might begin to wonder, what's the joy of growing up? Is there anything there for me?
I love that, Dr. Kathy. It reminds me of a conversation I had with some of our kids the other day, where we were all kind of sitting around in the living room and talking through different realities of what it means to graduate here shortly. I'm going to have a graduate here in May, and it's been really fun to walk through these different stages. But their school guidance counselor really walked all of them through this idea that they have to kind of get ready to pick a career. Now, I'm not opposed to it, but they really felt like they were kind of being pushed into, one of 5 categories, right? Like, if you're a female, you're going to go and be a nurse, and that's kind of what you're going to look in your plot in life. And there's kind of like these realities that I think that well-meaning people are saying, oh, well, if you don't know what you want to do yet, you should really go, and this would be a great career for you, because you could be a mom, or you could be a nurse, or you could do these other things. And they kind of throw these ideas out there without really ever considering the kids. And I think that sometimes that can even push some kids to this place of leaning towards this movement of dropping out, or quitting something when it gets hard, or walking away from things that they might kind of tie their identity to. I was always successful at academics in high school, so I should go and look at a career in this pathway, or what have you. So, Dr. Kathy, I want to ask you, with all of that said, how do we guide our kids well to know who they are, and know a little bit of what some of the gifts that God's given them, so that they don't, drop out or quit something when it's hard, when they don't understand it, or even when it doesn't bring them satisfaction or
Yeah.
joy?
Right. Totally important. Like, I'm glad that your school has a guidance counselor that is meeting with the graduates. And yet I would say there's so many things they can be and so many things they can do. And we talk here at Celebrate Kids about how hard it is for them to launch well now, because they're multi-talented, multi-able, multi-passionate, multi-concerned. And they also don't know all that the world holds for them. I'm going to say what we talk about here in identity is that if I don't know who I am, I don't know what I can do. So when kids are confused about the potential satisfaction or lack of satisfaction going forward, it's an identity issue. Who am I? If they don't know they're creative, they won't be able to choose a ministry or career, a pathway forward. If they don't know that they're an analytic problem solver, then they can't imagine maybe what they could do in their future. And so we have to get better, starting when they're little, of affirming God made you this way. Isn't he good to you? God gave you this skill and you're using it well for his glory. And I'm so proud of you. And I wonder what the future could hold. And I'll go on record to say that, we need to ask our young people, what is God calling you to? Well, he's calling you to faithfulness. He's calling you to love and to fulfill the Great Commandment and the Great Commission. It is not about career. Career is a way that you can fulfill the Great Commandment, Great Commission, and the purpose of your life. Absolutely. But it ought not be the thing that we'll get all caught up in. It's who do you think you've been created to be? And how would God want that to show up in your future? And satisfaction, success, joy, love, passion, purpose, relationships, belonging, security. These are the things that matter so much to us here. And we start to model that early on. If you're now raising children in school and all you ever talk about at the end of the day is the grade and the backpack, I'm sorry, you're in trouble. Because at some point there will no longer be grades given. And you're training your children to judge themselves and the people around them based on a score. And this is a reason that high school graduates flounder going out, because they're not graded and evaluated all the time. If they haven't learned how to evaluate themselves, they're in trouble. Do you ask them about the joy they had today? Do you ask them about the character they had today? Do you ask them, did you see anyone lonely? What did you do? Do you ask them, who did you serve today and why did you choose to serve that person? Have you ever asked your kid, did you cause your teacher to smile today? Tell me about that. There's so much that goes on in the academic day, whether we're homeschooling or we're sending our kids off to school. I like to say that there's more than what's in the backpack. And when we talk about the more, we give kids a better understanding, I think, of what their future could hold.
I love what Dr. Kathy had to say today. It reminded me of a passage that comes out of James chapter 1, and I'll begin reading at verse 2. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. I love this passage out of James. James is the brother of Jesus, and he's writing to Jewish Christians who really were scattered around due to challenging times, due to times of persecution. These believers face significant trials. And in all of this, James encourages them to see that their difficulties are really opportunities for spiritual growth. He teaches them that enduring these hardships builds perseverance, which leads to maturity and really wholeness and the true understanding of what it means to be human in the way that God's designed us. This advice runs really counter to seeking what quick solutions or temporary relief that our world really tells kids that they can have. One of the key passages out of this chapter of James is that this passage highlights the importance of seeing trials as opportunities for growth and maturity. It really calls us as believers to persevere through difficulties, understanding that this leads to wholeness, really wholeness in the sense of what it means to be human, and in the sense that God's created us for really beautiful, amazing times, and he uses sometimes challenging opportunities to really bring that to full completion. All of this runs counter to this idea that the world tells us that we should be pursuing easier, self-pleasure-driven paths. I wonder if one of the best things that we can give our kids is this idea of what James talks about, really facing challenging times with the idea of what is God really teaching me in this moment? And how can I see that this moment is too big for me to handle, too big for any other cultural idea to handle, but not too big for God to handle? I think teaching our kids that every challenge is an opportunity for us to grow in our faith really can give them a bright light that can shine and cut through some of the dark realities of their feelings and even the challenge that they don't feel good about these different situations. I hope that's an encouragement for you. Step into these moments and speak truth of the situation, but also speak truth of what God's doing in the middle of it. Dr. Kathy and I really love doing this podcast for you every day here at Celebrate Kids. And while these are challenging and maybe dark times for some of us, we're so thankful that we get to walk through these realities with you. And we want to thank you for listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast, this daily segment, Facing the Dark. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, my name's Wayne Stender, and we're looking forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.